So today's Digital Humanities Colloquium is titled Literary Characterization of Queen Mmanthatisi in Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia. We practiced this beforehand and I'm just not really good at doing this. Ideational or metafunctional analysis. And I think it will be very interesting presentation by Elias Ntlokgolo Malete. So Dr. Malete is a senior lecturer and academic head of the African Languages Department within the Humanities Faculty of the University of the Free State. And his scholarly interests include Sesotho literary criticism, historical linguistics, critical linguistics, discourse, and generative syntax in Sesotho. He published book chapters and articles in accredited journals, and he published a Sesotho editing book for Sesotho language practitioners. As a Sesotho language expert, he was an associate editor of the South African Journal of African Languages, a guest editor of the Sajal special issue honoring Dr. Mapala's literary works, which was published in 2023, and a book editor for a centennial celebration of Thomas Molofo's novel Chaka in 2025. He participates in regional and international academic associations, including the South African Folklore Society, the African Languages Association of Southern Africa, Association of Contemporary African Linguistics, the Athens Institute for Education and Research, and the Digital Humanities Association of Southern Africa. So that's a whole mouthful. Elias, I'll stop my share and then you can take over.
Thank you very much, Program Director. As you have correctly introduced me, I was just trying to. I wonder whether do you see my screen? Everybody can see my screen, because now I don't have access to.
I can't see your screen yet, and we tested this beforehand, so I'm sure we can get it to work. At the moment, I don't see it yet.
Yeah, I'm losing. Okay. Oh, there it goes again. Thank you. I'm not sure what was happening.
I don't see anything yet. Sorry, I don't see anything yet.
Is it? Okay.
Let me quickly check the settings on my side.
Oh my gosh, why is this happening? Do you see anything?
No, nothing yet.
Okay, let me share again.
Yep, now something is happening. Yep, I can see your screen now.
Oh, thank you.
Perhaps you want to put it on presentation mode.
Okay. Can I go on?
Yep, please go ahead.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my topic is the literary characterization of Queen Mmanthatisi in Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia, and the approach will be the ideational metafunction analysis. The Sesotho historical novels usually are derive their inspiration from traditional leadership institutions. And according to Slepe, several historical novels were produced during the 1960s until the 1990s. And quite a number of Sesotho authors really did try to capture the Basotho history by capturing them in literary work. And one of them is Guma, who produced two historical novels about Morena Mohlomi. And Morena Mohlomi was one person who also played a very important role during the Moshweshwe reign. And then also wrote a historical novel known as Munyani. But the most important one that Guma wrote is Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia in 1962, which is our focus for the presentation today. Of course, I've just presented quite a number of them, just to give you a background about the historical novels in Basotho. We have Malefane, Lesuru, Masia, who have all written about the historical novels to capture the history of our leadership.
Sorry, Elias, sorry to interrupt. We still see the title slide. I'm not sure if you're on the next slide already.
Now I've moved to the next. Do you see the next one now?
No, I just see that literary characterization slide.
Is it? But you can see me now.
I can see you, but so nothing has changed on the slide.
Oh my God. Can I stop sharing and share again?
Yeah, perhaps try that.
Into here.
I think this looks better. We see the proper slide now.
Okay.
It's just the title slide.
Can you see the slide moving?
Yep. I see the abstract slide now.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. I've just alluded to this slide here where I was saying most of the Sesotho authors have tried to capture the history of Basotho by putting them into literary works. And Guma is one of them who have written about a number of historical novels. And one of them, it is Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia, and which is, of course, our main focus. But I will just say as well that there are quite a number of historical books that were written by different authors as well. And I've mentioned people like Mojara, Mupedi Paulos, Malefane, Lesuru, and Masia. So It is not an unusual thing to see the historical novels written by the Basotho authors. So literature, of course, is very important, therefore. So that is why I put this second slide here to talk about literature. And literature, of course, is described as the art of words that are the only instrument that literary works can use to evoke aesthetic feelings in readers. This, I think I'll struggle to pronounce here, Pokrivaskova continues to state that literature affords the author the opportunity to express themselves through the expressionism, an approach that conveys a psychological or spiritual reality rather than just simply presenting a record of external events in a logical sequence. Therefore, the language of literature is an approach characterized by seeing the world through the eyes of the author, taking it as a unique product of a unique poet, dramatist, or even a novelist. To produce this unique product, writers employ their own particular language. They also employ their own procedures and techniques, which we might refer them to as literary style. And this is what we also want to achieve here by looking at the literary style of Guma through the characterization technique. But it is also important, ladies and gentlemen, just to have a brief history of Queen Mmanthatisi. Now that Guma has portrayed her in a fiction, historical fiction, but there was also, she was existing in reality. Now, in this slide, I'm just giving a short or brief history of Mmanthatisi, where it says she was born in the 18th century. And I know that there's also a controversy with regards to the spelling. Some they say Mmanthatisi, some say Mmanthatisi, but that is not our concern for the day. But Mmanthatisi, as a regent queen, had two names. Her name as a young girl is Munyadwe, and coming from the Basia clan. And at a young age, she was married off to a cousin, Mkocha, who was the chief of the Batlokwa. She was the leader of the Batlokwa people from 1813 until 1834. She became the power as the regent of her son, Sikonyela, and Julinsa as the initiation name, following the death of her husband, Morena Mokocho. The Batlokwa tribe was a breakthrough branch of the Bakata clan of the Bantu-speaking tseo communities, which originated from the Great Lakes and the northern Central Africa. We know that the Batlokwa tribe, coming from the Bakata clan, they are the fifth tribe. The first one, it is the Bapedi, followed by Maholokwe, then Maputi, then Batlokwa and Basia. So, and the issue of the marrying the cousins is a very common thing amongst the Basotho. So now, as a regent of the Batlokwa people, Queen Mmanthatisi assumed a power during a period of political instability and conflict, that is during the Mfecane, when the Zulu King Shaka caused that havoc, and heroically leading her tribe through immense challenges. It has been estimated that Mmanthatisi led about 35 to 40,000 people when expanding the Batlokwa group, as it was the largest. We know this slide is very important to highlight the fact that it is a historical event. Mmanthatisi as a queen did exist. But now in this novel that we are going to analyze, we are going to consider her as a fictional character. Now, the Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia as a novel. Here, according to Slepe, Slepe argues that Guma again portrays the unblemished history of the Basotho, which was untouched by colonialism, unlike in the case of Mohlomi. Guma here portrays a history characterized by strife, deceit, and power-mongering. In this novel, Guma portrays the significant role played by the Basia clan, in other words, the Basia damsel, in other words, the two ladies, which is Ntlokgolo and Mmanthatisi, who were successively married by the Batlokwa chiefs, Mundwedi and Mugojo, respectively. The story is in this way also constructed mostly around historical characters, events, and places. Two clans, the Batlokwa, who lived around Harrismith, and the Basia, who lived around Zastron, feature prominently in the story. Guma also used many known names such as Moshweshe, Chaka, Rakotswane, and places such as Harrismith, Hillbron, Zastron, just to make sure that even though it is a fictional novel, but it has got historical facts. And maybe just to support that fact, I've attached a map here indicating some of the towns that Guma talked about. We have Harrismith here in the eastern part of the Free State. That is where the place where the Batlokwa resided when they migrated from what is today known as Limpopo, and also the Basia, who followed them thereafter and who settled around the southeastern part of the Free State near the Zastron. So this area, generally the Free State, before the colonial period, it was occupied by the Basotho in general. So we can see that we have the towns, historical towns that are still existing today. So this is a fact also that the novel is a historical novel. But now let us look at why did I really became interested in this novel. Despite the significance of Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia by Guma, there remains a notable paucity of scholarly research dedicated to its analysis and interpretation, particularly regarding the fictional and the historical construction of Queen Mmanthatisi through the lens of ideational metafunction within the systemic functional linguistics. In short, one is saying we know that there are quite a number of scholars that have done research in terms of literary analysis. But as using the linguistic theory to analyze a historical fictional literary work, that has not been very obvious. So because of that challenge or the gap that has been realized, the aim of this study, therefore, it is to examine the literary representation of the regent Queen Mmanthatisi in Guma's historical novel by employing Halliday's metafunctional framework, which is, of course, a central theoretical construct of systemic functional linguistics. But above that, after learning about the Voyant tools, this study or presentation is also going to make use of the Voyant tool as a technical tool to collect data, but fortunately, again, also to analyze data. The novel was also selected due to its historical focus on Batlokwa, also because the Mmanthatisi as a female leader has also been recognized by the South African government, and there is a ship that is named after her. So that was the other interest that prompted me to look at this novel. Now, how are we going to, what is the approach and methodology here? The study is grounded in an interpretative paradigm and adopts a descriptive research design integrating both qualitative content analysis and the quantitative descriptive statistical approaches. Here, the quantitative, I'm going to use the voyant tool, but the qualitative, of course, will be the literary linguistics. The analysis concentrates on one key metafunctional language, which is the ideational metafunction, which encodes experiential meaning at close level. This study uses or used a monogeneric corpus-based text. In other words, it's mono in the sense that we only used one text, which is the novel Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia. It is a corpus-based because we have now inserted it into a technical website. Yes, the study used a monogeneric corpus-based text from Guma's novel Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia. I've already explained this. Now, how are we going to operationalize that? You do it through an examination of close-level lexicogrammatical patterns in which the historical Mmanthatisi is presented. With such patterns further subjected to corpus-based analytical procedure. I've already alluded to that. But I just want also to emphasize the importance of the voyant tools that I've learned also from the Sadila. And I just want to thank all the colleagues here who have introduced me to this. I'm still excited about it today, even today. The voyant tools are the web-based text reading and analysis environment designed to facilitate the analysis of various text formats. What I like most it is this. The voyant tool is used to extract and analyze data from Guma's novel to illustrate frequency rate of the lexical items. And we just want to check whether can we use the frequency rate of lexical items to determine the character or the literary character in a novel, but as well as to look at the verbs that can determine characterization of a character, and in our case here, Queen Mmanthatisi. Now, this slide also just explain what we mean, or the theoretical framework. What is this systemic functional linguistics? I've quoted here Ruan, who have explained different types of perspectives, but to say maybe the most important sentence to read here, it is that the concept of function is synonymous with the concept of use. In other words, instead of saying the function of the language, we want to find out how do authors make use of language to portray their stances. And that is what we want to find out here with regard to Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia and Guma. And for that reason, then, Halliday developed this theory that we call systemic functional linguistics. But within the systemic functional linguistics, we are going to look at only the ideational one. Now, Halliday and Mmanthatisi, they structured the language or the study of language in general into 5 dimensions. You can study language by looking at the structure, and this is what we are going to look at. You can also study language by looking at the systems. It can be the ranking system, the mode, the passive system, the negative, the polarity systems, and so forth. In other words, instead of dividing and categorizing the parts of speech into syntactic categories, Halliday and colleagues have divided them into systems. But the other strategy of studying language was to classify the language into layers, that is the stratification, and also to come up with a theory of how can you make examples in analyzing the language and function of language by making these examples. And this is what you call instantiation. But what I'm interested in this study, it is also how Halliday and his colleague make use of the metafunction to analyze meaning in text, whether it be as a written one or a spoken one. Now, I've already explained what we mean by this structure. In other words, it is where we look at the linear arrangement of the parts of speech in a sentence, and that is what they call syntagmatic order. And I've also explained the systems, and this is what they call the paradigmatic ordering of a language. And this section, it forms an axis between the paradigmatic and the syntagmatic. The syntagmatic is the ordering of the parts of speech in a sentence. The paradigmatic, it can also be regarded as the thematic analysis of a sentence or the text for that matter. But the stratification that I alluded to first, it is this what this diagram tries to explain here, to say, in order for us to understand the structure of the language, it is better to describe it into layers. And those layers are divided into the expression, which is the part where you pronounce the language, and the content one that is divided into morphology, syntax, but as well as semantics. These are the expressions. But later on, Halliday said, but we cannot understand the function of language without context. That is where then he came up with the third layer to say, okay, let us introduce the third layer, which is the context. In other words, in order for us to understand what a particular person is saying, we have to understand the meaning within a certain context. And it is in this context then that we are saying the systemic functional linguistics then can understand or study meaning in terms of, first of all, by looking at the ideational metafunction. In other words, by looking at the sentence structure as is. In other words, the subject, the verb, and the object. But they have used terminology that is outside the grammar that we are normally used to. And we also say the function of language as well, it is to establish a dialogue, and that is what Halliday calls interpersonal metafunction. But also to say, if you want to look at the structure, the grammar of the language, the dialogue, but you want to write a formal letter, what text are you going to use? In other words, is it going to be looking at the mode, the register? Is it going to be a letter? Or maybe if you want to say, I want to write to communicate to somebody else, to warn them about something, that communication, the interpersonal meaning, it is the communication between the reader and the author. So this is the structure that explains the whole thing. But in our case, we are only going to concentrate on the clause as a representation, where we are going to look at how the author contributes or takes out or express his experiential, his worldviews, his experiences. In other words, this is about are we going to tell us about, and then also who is involved, who is saying something, and how are we presenting it to us. That's basically what this structure is all about. But in our case, we are only going to look at the clauses, the sentences that the author, that Guma have used to portray the character Mmanthatisi. So this is the ideational metafunction. Now, what do we mean by this? In other words, it says here that it is the experiential metafunction of language. In other words, according to Halliday, we use language as an instrument of thought. Now, in using the clause to represent or conceptualize the real world to us, the principal grammatical element identified by Halliday is what he called transitivity. In other words, the verb will have to categorize something coming up thereafter. We know from the grammatical experiences, we talk of intransitive, transitive, and ditransitive. So the transitivity, it means language has to produce something. Language has to be a resource. That is basically what this is saying. Now, if we understand this, what we mean by ideational metafunction, in other words, one of the functions of language, it is to tell the people about our world experiences, what who did what, how, and so forth. This sorry now. This ideational metafunction then is divided, like I said earlier on, it's divided into three sections. It is the process types, which is the verb, participants, the subject, the circumstances, which is the object. In other words, they are just using the same sentence, structure of the sentence, but using the different terminology. Now, we have talked about systemic functional linguistics, then down to additional metafunction, down to the verbs of process types. And here are the verbs that the Halliday divide the verbs into material processes, those that tells us about what the person is doing, what is happening. The act tells us about the actors. In our case, Mmanthatisi will be the actor. But also there are verbs which are mental types. And this one is Mmanthatisi feeling happy, angry, and so forth. And what type of verb did Guma use to portray those feelings? Or did he use the relational processes or verbs? How did he describe Mmanthatisi in terms of his beauty, all those things that he is having? You know, how did he react in certain circumstantial circumstances? So these are the types of verbs that we are looking for, and we use the Voyant tool to try and isolate the verbs. And it is only you as a human being that will be able to say this is a mental verb or this is a material verb. So this slide just only explains to us what ideational metafunction is all about. Now, we have used the Voyant analysis to come up with this pipe diagram to say the diagram shows that there are more mental clauses than about 40% of the clauses that Guma used are the mental ones. And they are followed by the material ones. Then the third one is the relational one, which is 20%. And the behavioral one is about 7%. And we are able to calculate this statistics, it is because of the Voyant tool. Now, what interpretation can we then get from this one in characterizing Mmanthatisi? We say the interpretation is that Queen Mmanthatisi similarly was a thinker, more of a thinker than a doer or action, an actor. Even though you can see that there's not too much difference between the material, the mental one, the material one, and the mental one. They are almost the same. And this is this is because this novel is a historical novel. It involves facts that did happen. It is because Mmanthatisi also existed during the Fatlane, where he had to take action in fighting and so forth and so forth. But also, in order to win the fight, he also have to think a lot. So that also augur very well with this analysis that we use through the Voyant tool. Again, but with the mental one, the author puts more emphasis on the feelings, the thoughts, and the perception about her character. Sorry about this, that is her character, the feelings. And in this one, there are sentences that I've also highlighted. where Mmanthatisi has been expressing herself, her love to her husband to be. So the love, Guma also used a lot of sentences to express the love between Mmanthatisi and Mokotjo. So, yeah, we can say in terms of characterization, Mmanthatisi was more of a thinker than a doer. And if you think that when the Difratrani came, when the first Zulu group crossed the Drakensberg Mountains, and they got Mmanthatisi at Harrismith, Mmanthatisi had to flee away to go to Zathron. But along the way, he had to conquer and put everybody in all her battles. He had to come up with a strategy, which today there is a saying that says you are fighting the battles of the buttocks, and this is what Mmanthatisi came up with. So this is also to concur with that conclusion that she was a thinker, but they are more or less the same. Now, we said the voyant tool is also a tool that we can use to analyze. And it has helped me to come up with a corpus saying that we have about 42,000 words and 4,000 that are the Sesotho syntactic categories. And as I indicated earlier, the voyant tool also helped me to come up with the frequency analysis, the distribution visualization, especially in terms of the graphs, and the concurrence exploration, which are central to the corpus stylistic investigation of literary text. So we are able to know that because we have now the statistics, and we can see here in this table that even though we are looking at Mmanthatisi as our character, or primary character, but you can see that her husband has got more frequency appearances, which is 116, and Mmanthatisi only 51. But because Mmanthatisi and Munyarui are the one and the same, it means Mmanthatisi has got 78 appearances. So as Munyarui there, it would seem she will be also the secondary. But as Mmanthatisi, I have categorized her as the primary character. So both Mmanthatisi and Mokotjo are the main character in the novel because of the frequencies. But that frequencies, the counts are now being projected by the voyant tool as in a form of a graph. And you can see the graph, the green one is Ntlokgolo and Munyarui is the purple one. You can see that if you look at the novel itself, literally, you see that the name Mmanthatisi appears in the form of Munyarui only. But later on in chapter 9 out of 17 chapters, that is only where we see Mmanthatisi coming in. Also, the purple one. He appears there as Munyarui, but she only comes again in chapter 9. That is where Mmanthatisi comes in and becomes prominent. So you'd wonder whether is this novel about Mmanthatisi or about the history of Batlokwa or about Mokotjo, because Mokotjo has got more frequencies than that of Mmanthatisi. But this is the projection that we have, using the voyant tool. So the observation is that despite the prominence of the Basia damsel, which is Mmanthatisi and Ntlokgolo, the corpus frequency data indicate that lexical item Basia and Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia, glossed as or interpreted as yellowish and beautiful, occur relatively infrequently in the text. In other words, the title says Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia, But if you look at the frequency of the word Basia, it doesn't indicate that this should be the title. Specifically, Basia occurs 44 times at ranking 110 in the frequency list, while Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia only appears 11 times. One would wonder whether the title is relevant or have been captured very well. Secondly, from the corpus-based perspective, this low token frequency suggests that the title does not reflect lexical salience within the body of the text, which is instead dominated by the reference to the Batlokwa. And this is what I said with the graph. The book is more about Batlokwa than the Basia. Clear, even Mmanthatisi herself. Says, however, at discourse level, character distribution reveals a different pattern as well. 10 out of 17 chapters focus on the character Mmanthatisi, indicating her central narrative function. The character is referenced under two lexical forms, and this I've already explained. Literary names, it is the maiden name Mmanthatisi, and then also Munyadwe as her youth name. So even though the title is about the Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia, but the Mmanthatisi also appears in about 10 chapters in the form of Mmanthatisi and Munyadwe. So if you would not know that, then you would not consider Mmanthatisi as one of the major characters. This one just explains a foreground, what we have done and the results thereof. We say the frequency list were generated for selected lexical items. I've already explained that. Secondly, the distribution of graphs were produced to visualize dispersion of selected lexical categories. We have already explained that. And thirdly, the concordance analysis was employed to examine the recurrence pattern surrounding the character Queen Mmanthatisi. I can only say the study follows a corpus stylistic approach, integrating quantitative and qualitative literary interpretation. By combining the frequency, the distributional and concordance-based analysis, the method enables an empirical, grounded examination of narrative emphasis and character representation while remaining sensitive to the historical and cultural context of text itself. Yes, and I want to say, in terms of the ideational analysis, the study observed that the author, based on historical context, used linguistic expressions that illustrate Mmanthatisi's characterization as achieved through her actions in the physical way, and that we achieved that through the material process types and also through her thoughts. We could see the character through her thoughts, perceptions, and affections through the mental process types that we have identified, that they are more or less the same, and that what she says, which is the verbal process types, and what she has, which is the relational process types, only solidifies her mental and physical state. In other words, because of the statistics that the mental are more or less the same with the material. In other words, the characterization of Mmanthatisi can only be achieved by looking at these two states. The way he thinks, the way she loves, the way she acts, and so forth. And in conclusion, we would say Halliday's metafunctional framework, especially by now concentrating on the theory, provides a robust theoretical foundation for demonstrating the analytical potential of the systemical functional linguistics in literary discourse. And within this framework, the study reveals that the author's linguistic choices situated in a specific historical context systematically construct Mmanthatisi's character through the additional metafunction. And in particular, I think it is a repetition of that. It is in particular the material process, the mental, the verbal, the relational processes. Yeah, I think that is my conclusion there, to say the theory of the systemic functional linguistics as well as the voyage tool, they helped us to come up with an idea of how can we characterize Mmanthatisi as a literary character. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elias. That was a really nice presentation. I'm not sure if there are any questions. I see the chat still relatively empty, but if people have questions, please just write it in the chat. So I'm personally very much what's the right word? Impressed with how you move from the kind of linguistic theory to the more computational side and back. How you link these two. And I know, I mean, I've seen you at the trainings of Voyant, how difficult it is to get your head around what can you do with something like Voyant. It's just numbers and graphs, and how can you link it to the theory? But I think in your presentation, you really link these two together. So can you perhaps tell us a little bit more about how you managed to get that done? So I think your background is the linguistic theory, and then how do you figure out exactly what you can get from the graphs or from the numbers and how it links to the theory? I know it's a difficult
Yeah,
question, but
it's a very difficult question, but a very important question. And that is why I've gone to this slide. First of all, I've realized that let me first say, as a supervisor, most of the students, when you choose or you help them with the linguistic titles, they run away. And but now I was not totally a literary critique. So I had to find a way of how can I combine the two. And I realized that systemic functional linguistics can help me. But after learning through Sadila, attending the workshops, looking at the Voyant tool and other platforms, especially within the Sadila, I realized that this Voyant tool comes up with a lot of things. And with the second, the international one, the workshop that I attended, there was also so many things that one could derive and came up with conclusion in the analysis of literary text. So for me, when I put in this novel into Voyant tool, and then I went to the section below at the bottom there where the coherence, the context, and I looked at how it has isolated certain parts of speech for Sesotho. I then realized that I can easily come up with both the linguistic arguments, but also come up with the literary critique argument as well. But if you look at how I described the distribution of Mmanthatisi in that novel, it shows you through the graph and the statistics to say, if you look at the purple one, which stands for Mmanthatisi, then you can see that throughout the first chapters, there's no way that they don't talk about Mmanthatisi in the novel, which the other people who have analyzed it have said Mmanthatisi has not been done a favor because her name only, or her actions were only treated from chapter 9. And you can see that in the graph as well, the paper there, that during the rest, Mmanthatisi was never mentioned. But if you look at Mukoto with the grayish color, you can see that the name appears throughout the novel. So for me, that shows I can approach this interpretation of this graph from a feminist point of view to say why this female character at that time was not highlighted, because she was the one who protected the Batlokwa more than anybody else, even more than the kings and the chiefs of the Batlokwa. So it was quite interesting, and I'm still going to learn more, especially after attending that international conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I see that Kismi has asked a few questions. She says, thank you for the presentation. She has two questions. The first one is, I assume this is a first study, or are you able to reflect on how this type of analysis reveals how women are portrayed in African literature? And the second question, let me put you to that as well. Can you reflect on the learning curve to master this tool?
Yes, and this is exactly her question is related very well to you, the learning curve to master this tool. I am still learning, especially because I saw that during at the other platform where there are items where you can list the terms. There's a portion where you can also compare those terms, and I've never been able to do that. So again, where I'm still struggling, but I've not ventured into to analyze the text, it is to look at the section or the platform here where, or the phase within the Voyant tool about correlations. And if I can be able to export that and analyze those, the middle weight and where it appears on both left and right, and then come up, we can come up with a number of conclusions. So yes, there can be a very good integration between linguistics and online platforms. But about and this is what my introduction have alluded to, that everything that women were doing at that time could only be described from the behind, that they can lead from behind, even conceptually so. So much that even the book Tshehlana tseo tsa Basia, instead of saying the role, the heroic deeds of Mmanthatisi, it generalizes. So that is why I said you can even approach this through this graph and the frequency analysis approach, make use of the Voyant tool as well as the feminist approaches. So yes, we can highlight that. And it can also, even in other books, if you can come up with that approach, it will express itself in the very same way. If the book is written by a male author, you would see the negative way that will be coming out, and putting them on the graph, it would also tell the story. Thank you.
Thank you. So Benson has a question as well. So did you need to adapt to Voyant tools in any way to do your analysis, in particular to process Sesotho? And have you tried other tools like Stylo?
Currently, I've not used any other online platforms. I have already indicated, I'm still using, trying to learn this Voyant tool. Remember, I never thought that I would be able really to even have a clue of what is happening in the Voyant tool, if it was not because of the constant workshops that Sajil have just introduced them to us. And I saw that there are so many things that I can derive from the Voyant tool. What is important is that I've been talking with my colleagues here that I've introduced it now at honors level, giving the student the poem, put it on Voyant, and then they give me the way they can interpret those the frequencies and the graphs. So maybe once I master this and be able to integrate it into an undergraduate program, especially in assigning assignments, so that our student can be able to be conversant with the online platforms, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I quickly pasted the link to Sadler's Voyant instance, so you can play with it yourself as well. I also realize we're running a little bit out of time, but I see another question from Jonathan. I hope we can still take that one. He says, thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to ask about the identification of part of speech, such as verbs, adjectives, nouns, etc. So he's working with COSA, which has an agglutinative structure and combines subject, verb, and object in a single word. Does Sesotho have the same structure, and did you need to do any pre-processing step to extract verbs, nouns, and other parts of speech?
Thank you. That is also a very important question. When I started to indicate where I'm going to use the Voyant tool, when I have indicated two types of word categories there, that there are 42,000 tokens, but 4,000 word formations, which I refer to them as the part of Sesotho part of speech. In other words, the Voyant tool is able, because Sesotho is a disjunctive writing system, has a disjunctive writing system. This Voyant tool is able to categorize them nicely into word categories. The only thing that I think it cannot do, it is to say this is a verb, this is a noun. But all those words, it classifies them nicely. But because this is a disjunctive one, the particles, articles like ka, le, and where the a appears alone, it also separates them. And these are the most frequency highly counted aspects of in Sesotho that would appear in the frequencies. And I would always indicate that besides the particles like ka, le, si, and so forth, we've taken them aside and then making use of word formations in Sesotho that we can call them the parts of speech. So yes, in short, we can say the Voyant tool is able to give us the parts of speech, but it cannot annotate them into different parts of speech. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see somebody has raised their hand. Not sure if that's a comment or a question. Please go ahead, and then I think we need to wrap up.
Thank you, Menno. Just to identify myself, I'm Justice Roo. Sorry that I couldn't get onto my name here. But start off, Elias, a very good friend of ours. It is really a privilege to listen to you today. I think this may be the first, if not one of the first, or the first one where we've really seen an application on a corpus, on a literary corpus in African languages with some computational tools. I think I have to congratulate you on this and your work that you're doing in this regard. And if I may add to this, I think, Menno, you may also agree with me. I think that within the Sadler's resources, what we link and what we need there is a really larger corpora of literary text across all languages, African languages, so that this can also serve as an incentive to people using the tools on texts that are available. But all above, Elias, thanks a lot. It was a very good presentation, and carry on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Roo. Colleagues, Professor Roo is my mentor. The book that I've written and translated into Sesotho for language practitioners, he was the one who really identified me and assisted me. I'm very grateful, Professor. Thank you so much for those kind words. They are very important. And thank you for always considering me and also supporting me and having faith in me, Professor Roo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So there was a reason why I invited you, Elias. I very much like your work. So I totally agree with Prof. Wu. I think we're really running out of time, but thank you so much again for a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that we can see much more work in this space from you in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, colleagues. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.